All right, everyone. Good evening and welcome back to JPC Spiritual Talk. So this evening, we're going to continue the discussion into the NED, the research I've been doing. I've done 2 videos already on the NED. Started out with the history and the background, talked about what they do and some of the critics. They claim to promote democracy worldwide. Their critics say, instead of doing that, they're destroying democracy worldwide. Right? They meddle in foreign elections and they cause riots. The first 2 videos I did, the second one I talked about the CEO of NED, talked about his connections, especially to George Soros and others. So this evening, we're going to jump into this, get back into this. This episode is brought to us by our Father in Heaven. So I'm going to get the screen shared over. We're going to talk about Kenneth Wollack, who is the current chairman of the National Endowment for Democracy. I have some quick things to talk about. It's going to be a really quick video. We also have like a 3 to 4 minute clip we're going to watch of Kenneth Wallack, something he was talking about back in 2020. Remember to keep this in mind. Does the NED promote democracy worldwide, or is it destroying democracy worldwide? Is it meddling in foreign elections? Is it behind the riots we see in places like Ukraine, Russia, right? Bolivia, Venezuela, just to name a few, right? Even in Africa, just to name a few places. They're in over 130 countries, right? And there's other organizations too that we're going to eventually talk about. But the NED is our start. Let's share the screen over. We're going to get right into this, all right? Thank you all again for following. Here's a quick rundown of Kenneth Wollack. So he has some pretty good connections as well. So he's the active chairman. So according to the NED website, Kenneth Wallack is a prominent figure in democracy, promotion, foreign affairs, and journalism. With a career spanning over 5 decades, he is the active chairman of the National Endowment for Democracy and a member of the George W. Bush Institute's Advisory Council on Human Freedom. Wallack was also a co-chair of the Commission on Presidential Debates during the 2020 U.S. elections. Wollack also played a pivotal role in the National Democratic Institute, the NDI, where he served as president for 25 years. And contributed significantly to his global democratic initiatives. His career also includes contributions to American politics, journalism, and various roles in governmental and non-government organizations. So the key roles, some of the ones we talked about, right? So he's the active chairman of the National Endowment for Democracy. Is also a member of the George W. Bush Institute's Advisory Council on Human Freedom. Commission on Presidential Debates. He co-chaired the commission for the 2020 U.S. presidential and vice presidential debates. The National Democrat Institute, the NDI. He joined the NDI in 1986 as the executive vice president. He also served there for 25 years. He retired from there in 2018. He also traveled to more than 100 countries to support democratic development programs. Right? Some of his previous experience. He co-edited the Middle East Policy Survey, which I'm currently reading. Right? We'll talk more about that in other videos. He was the legislative director of the PAC from 1973 to 1980. Active in American politics, including work on the McGovern presidential campaign. McGovern was a huge progressive Democrat, right? Liberal Democrat. Education and fellowships. He graduated from Earlham College and a senior fellow at the UCLA School for Public Affairs. He served on multiple committees and task forces related to democracy promotion and foreign affairs. Some of his awards. He received several awards, including NDI's W. Averell Harriman Democracy Award and international honors from countries like Georgia, Romania, and Lithuania. Ken Wollack is a well-connected figure in democracy promotion, foreign policy, American politics, with ties to several people and organizations. Here are some notable connections. Madeleine Albright, we talked about her before. Former U.S. former U.S. Secretary of State and chair of National Democratic Institute, NDI, from 2001 to 2022. She passed in 2022. Madeleine Albright, she's also connected to George Soros, so making our boy Wallack connected to him as well. Some connection. So Wallack worked closely with Madeleine Albright during her tenure as the chair of NDI, with collaborations on numerous initiatives to promote democracy worldwide. Walter Mondale, former U.S. Vice President, 1977 to 1981, under President Jimmy Carter. Another progressive. Interesting. Connection. When Wallack joined the NDI in 1986, Walter Mondale was the chairman of the Institute's board of directors. Mondale played a significant role in Wallack's elevation to president of NDI in 1983. The Ronald Reagan Institute connection. Wallack co-chaired the Reagan Institute's bipartisan working group on advancing freedom and promoting democracy. This involvement connects him to a network of policymakers and think tankers who contribute to the Institute's goals, including figures, very high up figures in the part of the Republican Party, and also some bipartisan initiatives. The George W. Bush Institute, member of the Council of Human Freedom, we talked about that. Connection. The Bush Institute, led by former President George W. Bush, promotes global human freedom and democracy, aligning with Wallack's long-standing there. This connection connects Wallack with many leaders, scholars, and policymakers. I imagine so. Task forces and other roles. Brookings Institution. United States Institute of Peace, Council on Foreign Relations, Bipartisan Policy Center, Atlantic Council. Connection. There is participation in various task forces in these other roles. Wallack has worked with multiple figures across different sectors, including academia, government, and the nonprofit world, right? Global leaders and international honors. Wallack's work with the NDI brought him into close contact with political leaders and democracy advocates around the world, which awards and honors received from countries like we talked about, this Georgia, Romania, and Lithuania, all part of NATO, indicate a strong relationship with key international figures who value democratic governance. American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the AIPAC, so American Israel Public Affairs Committee. We're going to be looking at that one too. Role, former legislative director, 1973 to 1980. Connection, during his time there, Wallack engaged with figures in U.S. politics and the Jewish community, contributing to his network connections in domestic and foreign policy circles. We talked about Senator George McGovern, his connection there. Wallack served on the national staff of McGovern's 1972 presidential campaign. This early political experience connected him with a vast network of the Democratic Party figures and set the stage for his future roles in politics and international affairs. These connections highlight Wallack's deep involvement in domestic and international spheres, linking him to very significant individuals and institutions that promote democracy and human rights globally, according to all the sources, right? So we're going to watch a 3 to 4 minute clip. And we're going to listen to Kenneth Wollack. He's going to talk about some of the things they do. This was back in 2020. It's on C-SPAN. So listen attentively. And here's the question. Is organizations like the NED, are they really promoting democracy worldwide? Or are they destroying democracy worldwide? Are they meddling in foreign elections and causing riots? Right? Listen to what they have to say.
Optimistic. Share with us your own reflections on this speech and its enduring legacy.
Well, I remember this speech. It was about a few years before I joined this enterprise. But what was so surprising to people is not only was it visionary, but it institutionalized democracy promotion. I mean, it had its antecedents in the Atlantic Charter and the Marshall Plan, the preamble to the 1961 Foreign Assistance Act, President Carter's human rights policy. But matter of fact, legislation was introduced years earlier by Dante Fascell from Florida, who was to become chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Don Fraser from Minnesota, But none of those efforts really crossed the finish line in the sense of institutionalizing the infrastructure of democracy that President Reagan talked about. And I think that was why it was such a historic event and a historic speech. But Dante Fascell at the time, who became sort of the godfather of the National Endowment for Democracy on Capitol Hill, thought it was something everybody could support. Republicans and Democrats and business and labor all coming together to support the principles that were outlined in the president's remarks. Little did he know, he said, it was something for everyone to dislike as well. If Republicans and Democrats, business and labor can agree on such an initiative, you had to be suspicious. What was the motives? And the motives for some people was that these were institutions that were looking to feed off the government trough. And it crossed, as Roger mentioned earlier, it crossed party lines and philosophical lines. There were those on the left who saw this as a Reagan initiative, and therefore it was a tool in the Cold War. It was not going to challenge authoritarian regimes on the right. And there were those on the right who felt that our larger struggle against Soviet communism should be the priority, and feared that the downfall of friends on the right would lead to takeovers by communist insurgencies, whether it's the Philippines or Chile. And I'll just conclude by saying what was ironic about all of this is it was the snap elections in the Philippines in 1986 and the plebiscite in Chile 2 years later in 1988 that changed the entire debate over this enterprise. For those on the right, they saw that there was a democratic alternative to Pinochet and a democratic alternative to Marcos. And that there, in fact, there was a symbiotic relationship between the forces of the communist insurgency and the regimes, that they needed each other. And in that process, the democratic center in these countries were marginalized. But given an opportunity, as the Secretary talked about and President Reagan talked about, there was a broad cross-section of society that wanted certain functioning democratic institutions and a political voice. So the right suddenly saw that there was this alternative. And on the left, they saw that there was a challenge supported by the NED and the institutes of the endowment to challenge authoritarian regimes on the right. And it changed the entire debate in the Congress. And so as I go back to looking, and I reread the speech last night, it's as relevant today as it was back then. And it led not only to the institutional democracy promotion in the United States, but I think it led to the notion of democracy promotion by other intergovernmental organizations, networks of civil society organizations that had a profound effect on the sort of a international democracy architecture that's still in existence today.
You know, it's interesting.
All right. I think the video seemed like it was a little grainy. If it was, I do apologize. I don't know how it'll come out later on, like upload the video. So it was a little grainy. Apologize. I kind of was looking at it, but I hope you at least heard what he was talking about. So I'm going to close the video out like this, right? The NED, organizations like the NED, claim to be for democracy worldwide. The critics say otherwise, that they crash democracy worldwide. They meddle in foreign elections and they create riots, just like in countries like Russia, Ukraine, Bolivia, Venezuela, right? These are just to name a few, right? And there's more because they operate in more than 130 countries. So I'm going to close it out like this. You heard what he was saying. I've talked about the connections, right? They all connect to George Soros. You'll see that as I break down each board member, they all connect to George Soros. They all connect to somebody who connects back to George Soros, okay? And I'm going to continue to do this because that's how I'm going to leave it, right? So I've been researching this because I wanted to know, why are we in Ukraine? Why is so much money being pumped into Ukraine? Why is there riots happening all over a lot of these countries? Why are these countries destabilizing? Why is their democracy destabilizing? If these organizations like NED are supposed to be for democracy, why do we see a stabilization of democracy, right? So that's why I'm researching this, right? The question is up for all of you. Doesn't matter what I think. You'll probably never know what I think. I'm here to report. You all decide. Every episode is brought by our Father in heaven. I love you all so much. Hope you enjoyed this video. Have a blessed evening. I'm out.